Viktor Sulčič was born in 1895 in the village of Križ in the Trieste-Karst region. He attended vocational school in Trieste and studied sculpture at the Fine Arts Academy in Florence. In 1922, he graduated in architectural drawing from the University of Bologna. He finished his education, although his parents died early. 2 years later, he embarked on a ship to Argentina to find a better life, as did many others due to the economic crisis. A friend, Luis Mignone, with whom he had studied in Florence, convinced him to go to Argentina, his new homeland. At that time, Argentina was enjoying an economic boom. Viktor Sulčič arrived off the coast of Rio de la Plata on the 15th of November, 1924. In Buenos Aires, the temperament of South America had melded with the best of European art, architecture, fashion, cars, music, and lifestyle. A city that at that time had a population of around 1.5 million could reasonably be compared to big European metropolises like Paris and London. The old port of Puerto Madero has been completely renovated, but it still bears traces of an earlier era.
Ante todo, saludo al pueblo esloveno, de quien soy descendiente.
First, I would like to greet all Slovenes. I'm a descendant of Slovene emigres who came to Rio de la Plata and brought with them all their hopes, wishes, and experience so that they could start a new life with the other thousands of compatriots.
Nuevo camino que es el que emprendieron miles de esos eslovenos que llegaron aquí. Y estamos convocados prácticamente por la llegada también a estas playas del arquitecto.
Viktor Sulčič was working in Argentina, and he was a representative of the architecture of the day, which had undergone a big change with modernism.
Que en esos momentos tenía un vuelco fundamental con el inicio del modernismo, producto justamente.
This was a result of developments in art in Europe, originating from constructivism, the primal and original seed from which this new movement sprang.
Constructivismo, que fue la semilla esencial, original, que dio lugar después a todo este nuevo proceso.
It was a time of change. The use of reinforced concrete in the market of Abasto was a novelty not only in Argentina, but in the whole of South America.
Progress could not destroy this creation, although it destroyed much or most of the respected architecture of Buenos Aires.
Por suerte, pero quizás no es solamente por suerte, sino por el valor intrínseco que tenía esta obra.
Luckily, actually it was not only luck, but because of the true value of the building, Abasto was saved, at least the external form.
En su forma exterior.
In the same way as architect Sulčič marked Buenos Aires with his architecture, a French immigrant marked the city with music in the same neighborhood. He composed over 770 pieces, 514 tangos, and acted in many American films. In 1917, he sold over 100,000 records with the hit My Sad Eyes, and he sold 70,000 records in the first 3 months of a 1928 visit to Paris. This was the legendary Argentine tango singer Carlos Gardel, who in the 1920s and 1930s took tango to glory. He tragically died in an aircraft accident in 1935.
El Turu con la pelota le saca Giuntini, casi se la roba Seda. La tira para Soñora. Soñora juega la pelota para...
In Argentina, football is more important than tango. The best-known stadium is the Boca Juniors Football Club. The stadium is too crowded today. It's impossible to get tickets for matches with city rivals like River Plate, and even harder to get tickets for the Argentinian national football team.
La obra del arquitecto Sulčič es verdaderamente una solución verdaderamente admirable por las escasas dimensiones del terreno.
The work of Sulčič is really an admirable solution given the limited space and the location of the stadium. The solution was found by architect Sulčič and a civil engineer, statics expert Delpini, who knew the structure of reinforced concrete well, until then unknown in this part of the world or anywhere else in the world, and this was the solution.
Gracias a sus profundos conocimientos del cálculo de las nuevas estructuras de hormigón armado, y esto motivó la rigurosa.
The plan of the structure itself, the form, and the statics calculation were very precise. The statics experts had to consider the jumping crowds, which cause the biggest dynamic load and is very hard to estimate.
Con cargas dinámicas, como lo constituye una multitud que salta, que verdaderamente produce cargas dinámicas que son de muy difícil evaluación.
Diego Armando Maradona is the most important name of the Boca Juniors Football Club and of Argentina. In the museum, one can see the rich history of this club, and in the morning, visit the stadium of Viktor Sulčič. The museum keeps memorabilia of the club, which many promising young footballers would like to join. In 1536, the Spanish conquistador Pedro Mendoza sailed to the banks of the Rio de la Plata and founded the first settlement. He could never have imagined that it would grow into such a big city, which in 1900 numbered over 1 million people. Today, Buenos Aires is a modern city, shaped by many renowned Argentinian and foreign architects. Among them was Argentinian architect Cesar Pelli, who designed some of the tallest buildings in the world and also left a mark in his home country. Slovenian architect Viktor Sulčič, who unfortunately is not very well known and not respected enough, also left an enduring mark on the 1930s architecture of Buenos Aires. Branislava Sušnik was born on the 28th of March, 1920 in Medvoda. She went to primary school and classical gymnasium school in Ljubljana. She enrolled in university, where she graduated in prehistory and history. At the same time, she studied ethnohistory and Uralo-Baltic linguistics in Vienna. She finished her studies with a PhD in ethnohistory and Uralo-Althaic linguistics under the legendary anthropologist Professor Wilhelm Schmidt, who opened the door to anthropology for her, culturological comparativistic, as she calls it. From 1942 to 1943, she began studying the culture and languages of Asia Minor at the Vatican Biblical Institute in Rome. Under the renowned Professor Furlani, she graduated in the cuneiform script of Cappadocia, which dates to around 3000 AD. In addition, she attended lectures on Roman and early Christian archaeology and Sumero-Babylonian history and archaeology.
I left Europe as a young woman. I studied in the capital of the country in which I was born, Est in Slovenia, Yugoslavia, in the city of Ljubljana. I also studied in Rome and Vienna. Unfortunately, the war started, and after the war, communism was introduced in my homeland. Like many other opponents of communism who fled the country, I emigrated. Then I met Dr. Barbero. I was asked if I would be willing to set up a museum. I knew it was in Paraguay. I told him that there are many groups of Indians that I could study and do my research on. I was also told that everything was very close. So I came here 31 and a half years ago. I live and work here. Basically, I feel at home here. The museum gives a general overview of the material culture of the Indian groups in Chaco and eastern Paraguay, the Chaqueños and Guarani Indians. The objects originate from the time when these tribes lived their original Paleolithic and Neolithic culture, at least partly. Today they are adjusted to the new cultural environment. Their handicrafts have been passed from generation to generation. Young Indians learned it from older ones, most of all because of tourism. The museums hold artifacts of the original Indian culture before it met with civilization. Today, the Chaqueños are no longer hunters. Their way of life and their handicrafts have changed. They buy their pots, since they have no time to make them.
Between 1956 and 1958, Branka Sušnik organized several expeditions to remote Indian tribes. It has to be emphasized that her scientific explorations were in such remote areas that she even made a will, in which she left all the material and data that she had collected and all her work to the museum. Branka Sušnik wrote on a small piece of paper in her office that the highest title she had received was the one given to her by her friends. They named her La Doctora of the Chiripa tribe, with pants and potatoes. She always took flour, salt, potatoes, and tobacco with her on the expeditions. And in exchange, she got verbs, nouns, adjectives, bulbs, fish, fruit, and blissful peace.
She was evidently very welcome. An important shaman always helped her. With the Chamacoco, it was Aita, whom she remembered with love and sadness. When she returned in 1979, she wrote a book called Chamacoco, Cultural Exchange, about the shaman Aita, who had no longer been in favor of her because he had converted to the new religion of Christian evangelists. She certainly did not seem feminine enough to them. She was like a man, determined and loud. All of this won respect from the others. When she was with the Ayurveda people, who were probably in conflict with other groups, they said that they would protect her, because she spoke their language. In the Guarani language, they called her Kunya Kumbai. She told me they had called her Kunya Kumbai, which means woman-man. An initiation ritual was performed for her with the Chiripa people and the Ava Guarani. She was also given an Indian name, a kind of flower.
Immediately after the first expeditions, 1956 to 1958, she gave several lectures on secret societies among the primitive people, the culture of the Chamacoco tribe, and their social status, mythology, and shamanism. Among the Lengua Mascoi Indians, any man can become a shaman after initiation, but he has to have the natural psychological characteristics on which the power of visionary and trance depends. These powers are essential for communicating with supernatural powers. The beginner has to fast alone in the wilderness for a long time. He is not allowed to drink. He can eat only snakes, lizards, insects, and other vermin, and raw birds, so that he can learn how to whistle and thus communicate with souls.
Desde el año 56 que fue a los Chamacocos y que hizo
We acquired a lot of varied ethnographic material from 1956, when she visited the Chamacoco Indians, and made some archaeological excavations in Upper Paraguay. Weapons, musical instruments, wicker bags, hammocks, hunting whistles, gourds, wood figures, etc. All the objects were meticulously catalogued. When she returned, she accurately described the objects, wrote a date and origin and how she obtained it. She brought archaeological material from her field work.
Esta es la parte de urnas funerarias de los guaraníes que antes de la llegada de
These are Guarani urns. Before the Spanish arrived, important people from their community were buried in urns. When a person died, they put him in a fetal position in a baked clay vessel. The vessel was then covered. You can see the covers over there. The urn was then buried. Or they wrapped the corpse in a hammock and took it to the forest. They waited for the flesh to disintegrate, and then they picked up the bones, put them in the urn, and buried them. It looks like this is linked to a belief in the reincarnation of souls.
Todas las fotos, la mayoría de las fotos que lleva son fotos tomadas por ella misma.
She took most of the photos. If she is in a photo, she posed. She used the self-timer and ran in front of the camera. Her motto was to go among the Indians, far from civilization.
The land of Guarani and other tribes in South America was a real paradise for indigenous people, which our civilization has turned into a virtual one. It has all changed into a big commercial and tourist attraction, and the descendants of the Guarani have become producers and vendors of souvenirs. Iguazu in the Guarani language means big water. A lot of water will pass before we understand that a nature-friendly existence was a primary human constellation. Thanks to Branca, the shaman woman, their language, myths, and legends will stay with us. Her favorite Arab proverb says, "If you can't be a star in the sky, be a light on earth."
Peter Skvarča is an Argentine Slovene. He studied geodesy and geophysics in Buenos Aires and in 1973 became a glaciologist at the Argentine Institute of the Antarctic, which he also headed until January 2009. He undertook further training at the Scott Polar Institute in Cambridge. He and his brother Jure made numerous original climbs in the Patagonia Mountains. His scientific observation of the disintegration of Larsen Ice Shelf B in 2001-2002 is very important.
Along
the Antarctic shore, there is an observable trend of warming by almost 1 degree Celsius per 100 years. In the interior of the Antarctic, the results are not so clear because there is a lack of data. Anomalies appear approximately the same, that there is no warming. That is, that the glacier is in balance. However, on the Antarctic Peninsula, the average annual temperature has increased by more than 2.5 degrees Celsius over 50 years. This is huge, and we were unable to anticipate it with any model. On these two islands and on the Larsen ice shelf, we set up automatic meteorological stations, and we were fortunate that they still measure 6 parameters every 10 minutes.
Še vedno meri vsakih 10 minut 6 parametrov meteoroloških.
In another part, after 20 years, we again visited Kabolan Glacier on the island of Vega and measured a thinning of the glacier by 30 meters in the lower part and 20 meters in the upper part. The average thinning of the glacier was 24 meters. Peter Skvarča said, "The terrain is my environment. My heart is in Patagonia, my work in the Antarctic, and ice is everywhere." Over the course of these years, I have been to the Antarctic 40 times. I have led a great many expeditions. I'm currently taking measurements on Uppsala Glacier and Perito Moreno Glacier. The 1-hour documentary film will show the work of the Slovene Peter Skvarča in this virgin part of the world, which man, with his irresponsible behavior, is increasingly destroying. His report will make future generations aware of the need to use energy rationally and to preserve the balance of nature.